America is back.
US President Donald Trump has made it clear that he wants to do a deal with Iran over its nuclear program and avoid a war in the Middle East. This has left America's closest ally in the Gulf, Israel, out in the cold. But Trump is pushing through. His recent trip to the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, underlined this conviction. When Iran first agreed in 2015 to limit its nuclear program after years of negotiations with 6 world powers, including the United States, back then, these Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others, saw Iran as a dangerous adversary. They worked for a number of years to try and isolate Iran. It was perhaps the only common cause that they could find with Israel. But today, those same Gulf leaders have been making their own rapprochement with Iran. They want to avoid further instability and broader conflict in the Middle East. And a prime example of this is Saudi Arabia, which was Donald Trump's first stop in a 3-nation Gulf tour last week. At every stop in that 3-nation tour, Arab leaders urged Trump to find a negotiated settlement with Iran. Iran, whether it acquires a bomb, and as a consequence, if Iran is going to be bombed by the United States, both have a serious fallout for the region. Reaching a deal with Iran will test the hardline wing of Trump's supporters in the Republican Party as well, and whether or not they will fall in line with the president. For them, if that happens, it would be a departure from their long-standing demand that Iran completely dismantle its nuclear program. In fact, just last week, more than 200 congressional Republicans, both from the Senate and the House, urged Donald Trump in an open letter that they signed, to stand firm against Iran. The United States and its partners in the Middle East fear that a nuclear-armed Iran could set off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East and contribute to instability. And therefore, that would sharply raise the stakes for any kind of miscalculation either between Israel and Iran or between Iran and some of its major Gulf rivals. American officials speak positively about the progress in the talks between the US and Iran. These talks are being led by Trump's chief negotiator and Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. The president, in fact, last week said that Witkoff had given Iran an outline for a deal and pressed Tehran to respond to it. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who is the points person from the Iranian government, he later denied that there was any such written proposal from the United States, either directly or indirectly. And later, that led to a full-blown war of words between Mr. Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy, and Mr. Araghchi, who is Iran's foreign minister and the public face of its negotiations with America over the nuclear deal. The public comments by both parties belie the 4 rounds of talks that have already happened. These were mediated by Oman, which happens to be one of Saudi Arabia's closest partners in the region. Nonetheless, there are significant gaps between the two sides. Trump continues to insist that Iran must halt all the enrichment of uranium, whether it fuels civilian nuclear energy or whether it is used for nuclear weapons. Israel and some of Trump's most fervent supporters are pushing for this outcome. Iran, on the other hand, continues to insist that it will not stop enriching uranium altogether and that it has a right to enrichment of nuclear energy for civilian purposes under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT, which Iran has signed. Iranian officials have said that they would be willing to stop enrichment at the higher levels that are used for nuclear weapons, which exceed the requirements for civilian nuclear use. They have also said they're willing to scrap their large stockpile of highly enriched uranium, in fact, even suggesting that Russia should keep Iran's highly enriched uranium. But Iran is very clear they are not going to stop enriching uranium entirely. Ali Shamkhani, who's a top advisor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, repeated Iran's position to NBC News. Trump shared that article on Truth Social without offering any comment, and that was perhaps a signal that Trump is giving his tacit approval to this plan. But those concessions were effectively the same as what Iran agreed to in 2015, in the first deal that was signed between Iran and 6 countries. In return, what Iran got was relief from crippling economic sanctions. Trump despised that agreement. He felt that it was too much of a giveaway. It was negotiated by his predecessor, President Barack Obama. And then in his first term, Trump forced the United States to withdraw from that Iran deal in 2018, and then he once again resumed sanctions on Tehran. But currently, President Masoud Pezeshkian of Iran, he has reiterated his country's commitment to negotiating and an unwillingness to concede the right to civilian enrichment. Uranium needs to be enriched to more than 90% to make it weapons grade. Iran has got to about 60% enriched uranium, and the estimate seems to be it can reach weapons-grade enrichment within weeks, if not months. So the ideas on a possible US-Iran deal include a long-term freeze on Iranian enrichment under enhanced international inspection. For this, the IAEA as well as other associated bodies will need to be brought in. Another idea would be for Iran to agree to phase out its enrichment program over a period of time if it is assured that they can have a reliable supply chain of nuclear fuel on the global market. That might satisfy Trump, signaling that Iran had not rejected the idea of ending its uranium enrichment at some point in the future. The sanctions that have battered Iran and that its leaders so badly want to be lifted could also be removed in phases. American corporate investment in Iran could be designed to enhance long-term trust and provide some kind of a deterrence against another war breaking out in the Middle East. But Iran was once bitten and therefore twice shy. It has been stung once by Trump's unilateral withdrawal in 2018 from the previous deal. Iran will now want guarantees that the United States will adhere to a new deal if at all both the US and Iran are able to arrive at one. Iranian officials seem to believe, and not without reason, that Trump as a Republican president would be better placed to guarantee a deal than a Democrat, particularly because it would be bilateral between Iran and the US and not among multiple nations like the 2015 agreement was. So effectively, they have another 3.5 years under Trump 2.0 to get this deal done. Iranians are also likely to take some encouragement from Trump's announcement last week to lift sanctions against Syria's new leader despite his terrorist past. Though the president can lift some sanctions on his own, other lifting of sanctions require congressional approval. Trump, in that trip, controversially met with Syria's new leader, Ahmad al-Sharaa, despite the fact that until some months ago, he was heading an al-Qaeda wing in his country and had a $10 million bounty on his head. Trump faces opposition to an Iran deal from those within his camp, particularly neoconservatives on Capitol Hill, who have cheered his withdrawal from the earlier deal in 2018. One of those neocons happens to be his Secretary of State, the other his Vice President. They have long demanded that Iran agree to complete denuclearization, a ban on all enrichment, and the dismantling of its massive nuclear infrastructure. Iran is non-committal yet. Trump, the master of deal-making, will have to bring his full weight to bear on this one.